Welcome to the AA Horror Highway. I'm Amy Ketchum.
And I'm Amy Cassio.
And today we're going to discuss The Perfection, which came out this year, 2019. And before we get started today, a quick PSA. Join us by becoming a patron at Patreon. We would love your support. As we wrap up Season 1, we'd like to return for Season 2, but it all depends on our audience and if you would like a Season 2. So show us some love over on Patreon. We spend 30 to 45 hours per episode of our free time, depending on the complexity of that episode. So visit us on Patreon now and help keep this show going. Patreon.com/AA Horror Highway. After this episode, we're going to go on a slight hiatus. We're taking a break, but in the meantime, we'll be recording a Thanksgiving and Christmas episode. Keep checking our Patreon for mini episodes and other goodies as we create and release them.
So I hope all of you are having a great Halloween. This week is Halloween. I personally love to carve pumpkins. I like to watch scary movies. I mean, I do that all year round, but, I like to ramp it up during Halloween. I like to decorate. So, Ketchum, you had a little something that you wanted to share with us related to Halloween.
Yeah, I just thought I would share, this is just a little tidbit. It's just a little cartoon. If anyone wants to go try something new that's old, when I was a child of the 80s, I remember us watching this on more than one Halloween occasion. We would actually project it on the wall, which was kind of creepy because, big creepy house and white ivory, whatever, wallpaper and dancing skeletons on it. But it's called Dance Macabre. And it's a 1980s cartoon. I think it's from PBS. And it's out on YouTube if you search it. Dance Macabre is by a composer named Camille Saint-Saëns. And it was written, maybe a couple hundred years ago. It's an ancient song, very popular piece. But I remember it so fondly because it's dancing skeletons. It's just creepy. There's no dialogue. It's just music. And currently it has 3 million views on YouTube, which is pretty cool. So we'll be sure to link that. So do you have any plans for Halloween this year? I personally am going to be handing out candy and I'm going to be drinking my witch's brew.
I have a friend who's having a party. She likes to have a giant Halloween party at her house. I might, go to that. Otherwise, I like to keep it chill. I like to hang out at home, maybe have a bottle of wine. Put on some mood lights, watch some movies, have some candy, because I'm obsessed with chocolate. Chocolate is my weakness. I can't quit it.
I know what you're going to be doing on Halloween. You're going to be watching The Midnight Hour from 1985, because I'll be doing that too.
What was that one about again?
The Midnight Hour is a comedy, romance, horror movie. It was a TV movie on ABC circa 1985. I believe it's 1985. Lots of famous faces. And it's a story where the teenagers bring the dead back to life by reading an ancient scroll. And then the world just falls apart around the main characters. It's a male-female love story happening. And it's up to them to save the world and put the dead back underground. But it's a great story. It's just a lot of fun. It's a family-friendly type of horror, so it's not very scary.
So do you have any other horror movies that you love to watch around Halloween?
Well, obviously Halloween.
Mm-hmm. Your favorite movie.
Yes, I'll be watching Halloween. Usually in October, if I can pull it off, I like to watch a different horror movie every night. But I've been doing that now for months, so I don't really know if it's going to be special this year in October, but I usually watch Halloween the original, and then I'll watch the sequel, Part 2. And if I'm feeling super sassy, I'll go on to Part 3. And Part 3 is a different kind of movie. I know you haven't seen that one, but it does deal with Halloween and costumes, and it's really cool, the costume part. But a lot of people don't like Part 3.
So I personally love to watch the Elvira movie around this time, so it's not a scary movie, but, it's got the horror elements. It's Elvira. I love that movie so much.
Is there just one Elvira movie?
I believe so. And then, because she keeps trying to get, some more movies made, but because that movie failed at the box office, they won't do it. She actually recently posted on her Instagram that she was shopping it around, and she just kept posting that nobody would take it. She was like, well, I talked to Netflix and they said no. I talked to Amazon, they said no. And she's like, but I'm going to keep trying. Stay tuned.
Well, it seems like everybody and their mother has their own series and Netflix original movie. I don't see why she couldn't. I mean, everyone knows who she is.
I know.
She has a following.
Yeah, like, I don't get it. I don't get the hold up. But she said in an interview recently that one way or another, she is going to get her next movie made, even if she has to pay for it herself.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I did watch Mistress of the Dark. I believe that was the name of it.
Yeah.
I guess last month, after you urged me to try it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see I'd like to see a new movie with her in it. That'd be fun.
Mm-hmm. And now we should get into the perfection. So I like to think of this movie as being an elevated fantasy about dismantling male power.
I agree. I think that is a great summary.
So, again, this movie came out this year in May on Netflix. And so we really want to stress before we get into the plot synopsis here that you should, if you haven't seen this movie, go watch it and then come back. Do not listen to this part because
Right.
huge spoilers coming. And this is the kind of movie where you need to go in blind and you don't want to know anything. You are really going to enjoy it if you know nothing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Do not listen to this if you have not seen it. I mean, there are twists and turns. The twists have twist. The turns have turns.
Yeah, it's like you just don't know what's going to happen here. So
right, and you will
turn
if you
away.
listen.
Yeah, and we don't want you to know. We want you to watch, and then we want you to come back because it's much more fun. And also, it's not going to make sense to you. That's another thing. We're going to tell you this, and if you haven't seen it, none of this is going to make sense. You just need to see it. This might be a little bit longer of a plot synopsis than you're used to because there's a lot going on with this movie. So I would like for everybody to gather around the campfire, grab your marshmallows, for Amy Ketchum shall tell you a tale of love, revenge, and betrayal.
Hey, Cassie, can you hand me a stick? I want a marshmallow too.
Here you go. I've got a whole bag of marshmallows for us. I am so ready.
Excellent.
And a lot of chocolate. But I keep eating the chocolate, so there might not be very much left.
I know. I thought I saw a bunch of empty wrappers. I wonder what happened, but... Okay, everybody. I've got quite the tale for you today. Charlotte is a talented young cellist prodigy who, after 4 years, was forced to leave back off a prestigious music school in Boston to care for her terminally ill mother. We also learn that during this time, she's been in and out of mental hospitals. After her mother's death 10 years later, Charlotte reaches out to Anton, the head of the academy, and travels to Shanghai to join him in carefully selecting a new batch of young cellists to receive a scholarship to his school, where they will board and learn as Charlotte once did. Charlotte befriends Lizzie, Anton's current star pupil, who replaced Charlotte at Backoff 10 years prior. They have an instant connection, and after a night of clubbing and sex, Lizzie invites Charlotte on her much-needed vacation that she describes as a rough and tumble trip through rural China, and Charlotte, having nothing better to do and excited to have more fun with Lizzie, accepts. The next morning, Lizzie wakes up with a hangover, and Charlotte offers her some ibuprofen and a shot of alcohol to wash it down. They begin their trip by getting some street food and then hopping on a rickety, dirty public transportation bus filled with people who all but one only seem to speak Mandarin. Lizzie begins to feel progressively ill and takes 4 more of Charlotte's ibuprofen. As her condition worsens, she throws up maggots and remembers the day before when she found out about a contagious airborne virus that was killing people in Hunan, where she'd recently visited with Anton scouting talent. This sends her into a spiraling panic, frightening the other passengers until the driver ejects her and Charlotte from the bus, stranding them in the countryside. Now increasingly ill and paranoid, Lizzie sees bugs crawling inside her arm and eventually bursting out of her skin before Charlotte offers her a meat cleaver and Lizzie hacks off her infected right hand to make it stop. Using a film rewind technique, it's then revealed that Charlotte drugged Lizzie with medication prescribed to Charlotte's late mother, which can induce hallucinations, especially when consumed with alcohol. She then stole the meat cleaver from the food market and reinforced Lizzie's hallucinations by agreeing with her until she cut off her own hand. 3 weeks later in Boston, Lizzie shows up at Anton's with her right hand missing and explains what happened to her, expressing that Charlotte must be jealous of her having the life that she had to give up. Anton quickly grows cold and kicks her out of the academy since he no longer has a use for her, and Lizzie is devastated. This is her home. Everything has been taken away by Charlotte. Soon after, Lizzie travels to Minneapolis where she breaks into Charlotte's home and overpowers her with a stun gun, then kicks her several times before returning to back off with Charlotte bound in the trunk of her car as an offering for Anton to accept her back into the family. When Charlotte awakes, Anton is there, and she explains this was her way to remove Lizzie from Anton's abusive sex cult. It's revealed that Anton has been raping and torturing young girls for years when they don't achieve musical perfection. Enraged, Anton chains Charlotte to a chair on a stage. Anton states that if she plays a complicated piece without error, she will be free to leave. She accepts the cello piece but makes an error. Lizzie, along with Anton's goons, Theus and Jeffrey, bind her and prepare to gang rape her, but suddenly Theus and Jeffrey collapse and die. Lizzie and Charlotte kiss, and it's revealed the two conspired together, poisoning the men's drinks. Charlotte's plot resulted in Lizzie coming to her senses about Anton's brainwashing, and together they seek their revenge to stop him from harming anyone else. They attack Anton with knives, but he manages to wrestle the knife from Charlotte, mutilating her arm before Lizzie knocks him unconscious. Some unspecified time later, Anton's mouth and eyes have been sewn shut and his limbs amputated, where he's forced to listen as Charlotte and Lizzie perform for him in the chapel, playing as one, both compensating for the other's missing hand.
So this movie was directed by Richard Shepard, and he co-wrote it with Nicole Snyder and Eric C. Charmillo. I'm probably butchering his name. And the movie stars Allison Williams as Charlotte, Logan Browning as Lizzie, and Steven Weber as Anton Backoff, which we all know him as the Wings guy. Did you watch Wings back in the day?
I didn't watch Wings, but I instantly knew he was from Wings because I think Wings was on TV for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, it was just, I wasn't ever trying to watch Wings. It just kind of was on before or after the things that I wanted to watch on TV. So I ended up unintentionally watching a lot of Wings. So let's talk about the history of making this movie. This movie was very, very inspired by South Korean horror movie, specifically the works of Chan-wook Park, and in particular, The Handmaiden, which, after researching this movie, I did go ahead and watch The Handmaiden, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. It's an erotic thriller, and it's just like this movie where there's different acts, and there's all these different twists that happen at the end of each act, and you don't know where it's going to go. So after watching that movie, I was like, I could see exactly how the perfection was inspired by The Handmaiden. So, before watching this movie or researching it, I hadn't really, watched any kind of South Korean horror, but apparently that's a thing where these movies have these crazy twists and go all over the place and different acts and things like that. So yeah, the director of this said that he was, highly inspired by that. And so he really wanted to create a movie where the audience would never know what to expect next. Because again, he loves movies like The Handmaiden where they're playing with structure and they do these outrageous twists, but yet in the end everything makes sense. So everything just kind of flows together and fits once you get to the end, and then you can go back and rewatch it and see how everything makes sense. So the director, Richard Shepard, he says that he loves the way that Korean cinema is willing to twist things completely in a way that's not done in American movies. And he said that it's not just a twist, but they almost feel like they're different movies, the way they have these twists and different acts. And so about the bus scene in the movie, so that was based on a real life event that he had, where he was traveling on a bus in Mexico, and he did get sick. he wanted to see what it would be like if he really took that situation and like stretched it, made it bigger in this movie. Also with this movie, he was very aware that he felt that he's 1 degree away from being full-on camp and exploitation, and so he was towing that line. He feels that everything was able to stay grounded because of the performances of the actresses, Allison Williams and Logan Browning.
Okay, and that kind of ties into a couple of quotes I have. I thought these were really good descriptions. So this one's from RogerEbert.com. Sheila O'Malley writes, "The perfection has a gory grindhouse sleaze overlaid with the tony gleam of the upper crust, a very sick combo." And then from Entertainment Weekly, "The perfection is, at times, a steamy international romance, a gritty crime saga inspired by Korean cinema, a showgirl-style meditation on the dangers of competitive obsession, and it all ends with a hard-earned wig reveal that segs into a peculiar yet devilishly satisfying final shot." I thought those were both pretty good descriptions. I love the showgirls twist, because that's perfect. The dangers of competitive obsession. Because in this movie, I mean, we understand that there's something unsettling, maybe, about Charlotte. That she may not be a very healthy, mentally healthy individual. So we don't know how deep this competitiveness is in her, or an obsession in her from having to leave the school, and what is really going on inside of her.
Yeah.
And I think we really first feel that when she pulls out that meat cleaver. So I really like that they're comparing it to Showgirls, because I know we both love Showgirls.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Showgirls. And I felt a lot of camp in this movie in the way of John Waters. Like, it kind of reminded me of John Waters stuff, which we both also love. We're both kind of obsessed.
Right. Like if John Waters had a big budget, he might do something like this.
So the marketing of this movie, it was pretty hard to market as far as like making a trailer, because this movie has so many twists that you don't want to give them away. So the trailer, they said it was very difficult to try to make a trailer for this. So the trailer is, I don't know that it's misleading, but they just said they had a hard time and they couldn't really accurately portray what the movie is without spoiling it. So I personally went in totally blind. Did you go in totally blind, or did you see the trailer?
I don't think maybe it was a trailer. I think I guess it was a trailer. I think I saw it advertised at the beginning of a DVD. I mean, I think it was quite a while ago, like a year ago. Oh, really? Yeah, and...
Because, it was made like a year ago.
Yeah, and when I saw it, I didn't really understand anything about it, because obviously they're not going to tell you much. But they played a little piece of the cello, and all I knew is that it was some type of obsession that had to do with 2 cello players, and I was like, all right, that's going on my list. So I feel like I went in like totally blind, other than knowing that they play the cello.
Yeah, I went in totally blind. It was, it popped up on Netflix, and a friend of mine said that he saw it, and he was like, that was really, I mean, he didn't really give me any information, but he was just like, that was really intense or something. I believe I think that was the week that I got rear-ended. So I was in bed like all week, and so I hadn't gotten around to watching this yet, so I went ahead and watched it. And then I just completely loved it. And then I watched it 2 more times within like a 48-hour period. So I watched this movie 3 times in like 48 hours because I was so into it. And then I remember coming to you and being like, you've got to watch this movie, and we really have to do a podcast episode about this. And I was just praying.
Yeah, as soon as you saw it, you were immediately like, this is it, we have to do this. And I didn't know what it was, and then as soon as it started playing, I was like, oh, this is that movie that I intended to watch. And I totally had forgotten what it was called. So what kind of impact has this movie had on you?
Oh man, if we get into this, I mean, well, first I want to say like that the overall feeling about this movie from people, it seems very mixed to me. So it feels like generally people agree that the first 45 minutes or so are really good and enjoyable. And then, once the hatchet comes out, the movie goes off the rails.
Right.
And that's when it starts losing you, or you are like, oh my God, I love this.
Right.
And you just like are going along for the ride. And of course, I'm that kind of person where I saw that hatchet. The second, okay, so like when they do the rewind scene and then you see why the hatchet comes out and you have, the extra knowledge of what was going on, then I started laughing and I was like, this is a fantastic movie.
Right.
I was like, this is so campy with this hatchet coming out. Now that I know the details, I am all the way here for this movie. Let's just keep this going. And I was not disappointed at all throughout the rest of the movie. It was fantastic.
Yeah, for me, I view this as like a three-part, like three different kinds of movies. Like our first part feels like, a really well-made drama, story. The middle part is like a Korean over-exaggerated horror. And then at the end, it's like, it kind of goes into Grindhouse, even how gruesome it gets, but also it like flips into an art movie. It's like got this really artistic, weird twist to the end. And that made it kind of hard for me to watch, actually.
So as soon as I finished the movie, I remember like listing off what I thought this movie was and sending it to you. And I was just like, oh my God, this movie is a genuine lesbian love story. And it has a happy ending. And it's in the form of a horror movie. And I was like, this is just fantastic. It's queer horror. It's lesbian cinema. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. And it's a rape revenge done in a way where you don't even know that you're watching a rape revenge until the very end of the movie. And usually with a rape revenge, it's not my thing and it's very difficult to watch. But they did it in this way where you don't even know that that's what's happening. So you don't see these gritty details. You're not watching the abuse. They just did it in a great way, in my opinion.
And I feel like it didn't have the stereotypical tropes that we see in a lot of lesbian love stories that turn us off, because it's negative portrayal. But, we do have the trope that, crazy lesbian, when she pulls out that hatchet, I mean, everything just changes in this story at that hatchet moment. I mean, really, that is just so over the top. Because then immediately your brain's like, wait a second, is she crazy?
Yeah, it's
I thought she
it's
liked
complicated.
Her. What's going on
it's
here?
It's a complicated situation. Which I think that would take us into our monster/antagonist and its rules.
Right.
Because our true monster is Anton, but we kind of feel like Charlotte is the monster throughout the movie. And we don't really know, we don't know what's going on with her.
Right. We can't trust her.
Yeah.
It's an uneasy feeling throughout the movie that you don't know this character well enough. You don't know, because there's little flashbacks happening. You don't know if you can trust her.
Yeah, like we know that she's been in and out of the mental hospital. We know that it was recent because she has short hair, like her real haircut under her wig is that she has short hair, which means she just got out. So I would like to think that she got out because she was stable enough to get out, but we don't know. Like, did she escape? I mean, I hate to say that, but like, did she escape? Or was she really just well enough, but because of the upbringing that she had, this is the way that she thought she needed to deal with this situation to get Lizzie out of this environment that she's in. It's very complicated. She's a very complicated character to try to figure out.
Right.
We don't know what her mental state is.
Let's talk a little bit about this particular cult and what we know of it. Which isn't a lot. They don't really do this grand reveal that there's this strange cult until the end of the movie, really. I don't know. I mean, did you feel that way? Did you feel like you were putting together the pieces, that there was a cult before they announced it?
No, I didn't have any idea. I didn't know what was going on. Like, I was just...
Yeah, I think that's how I felt, too. So this cult, he is grooming and brainwashing young females. And we can say they start at the age of 9 or 10 because Charlotte comes in at 10 and 4 years later, Lizzie comes in at 9. And by grooming them at such a young age and letting them live there on scholarship, it makes it near impossible for them to leave. But we do see that Lizzie is permitted to take a vacation, so she's not truly a prisoner. She can come and go. But after 10 years of grooming,
yeah,
it's like she truly believes that her ultimate goal is the perfection, meaning that she is a musical vessel to bring them all closer to God in some way. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you noticed this, but she's wearing a cross necklace. And to me, I mean, I know a lot of people wear cross necklaces, but to me in this movie, it felt like, you know, because he mentions at the very beginning that she's as close to God as you can get, you know, with her perfect music. But I felt like that cross is the cross she bears. You know, like she's carrying these deep secrets and darkness. And it's so deep and dark that she is allowing herself to deny it. You know, that she doesn't even want to face it. Mm-hmm. It's just a part of her life there. And she's willing to accept it because it's truly a cult and she's been groomed. And, you know, so that is our main monster. Outside of Charlotte's unstableness, you know, you have this cult thing happening. And there's no telling how many women or young girls this has happened to over the years. Mm-hmm. And I think when they go to Shanghai, they're bringing back 4 on the scholarship. It was 3 on 4-year scholarships.
Yeah, I think at the beginning it was that they were competing to see which one would get to go.
Right.
And so Lizzie and Charlotte were the guests to help him decide which child he was going to take, which is horrifying.
Right. And then they took Zhang Li is the child that got to come back, I believe, that they bring in later to watch the perfection performance that Charlotte has to give.
So this can all lead us into our themes, because we have a theme of loss, which relates to that, because we have the loss of the mother. We have loss of innocence, as we were mentioning, because of this cult. These people are being isolated. These kids are being isolated from their parents, taken away. They don't know anything else. Their growth is probably being stunted. They're probably not developing social skills, like the normal social skills, because if they're these prodigies, they're just spending all of their time practicing this craft with this man, and they're just isolated from everything, and this is their life. So they don't know anything else.
Right. Yeah, he's taking them during their formative years to mold and shape them into what he wants. Mm-hmm. It's disgusting. Okay, so tagging along onto your loss, we can say they had a loss of career, they have a loss of hands. Anton at the end has a loss of all of his limbs, forcing him to listen to them. So there's an ongoing theme of loss in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. The sex cult, as I mentioned, that is a theme, which was a perfection for God, is how he would present it to them. Grooming from a young age is a theme. Betrayal, revenge, we could say rape revenge. The most popular movie for rape revenge is I Spit on Your Grave, which this kind of has a similar vibe, but this is actually a much more powerful message, I believe, because it's a duo. They have combined their energy and their strength. We also have a theme of body horror. So the things that are happening with her body, such as the bugs crawling under her skin or cutting off her hand. We have contagion horror, being afraid that there's a virus or something they're going to catch. We have an ending a cycle theme to protect other females or children and stopping this from happening. And then the theme that we all love is the true love happy ending. So what I wanted to say about this was that, for me, it didn't feel like that was Charlotte's intentions, because Charlotte didn't know Lizzie originally. She was going into this blind. So I felt like Charlotte first wants to befriend her for a bigger goal, which is to devastate Anton in some way. So if she can become her friend, that'll make it a lot easier for her to persuade her, manipulate her, whatever she decides to do. But when Lizzie professes her admiration for Charlotte from a place of truth and conviction, and it's just, pure honesty, we can see it written all over Charlotte's face that she's never heard anyone say these things to her. And, especially someone who is so wonderful at the cello that she admires as well. So Charlotte feels the love and opens up to that experience.
Yeah, they have an instant connection, and I don't think that Charlotte was expecting that.
Right, and she's tempted by the thought of being a duet, which, of course, they later achieve by playing the song together. But I think Shirley has that going through her. It's just like this instant connection, like, wow, we are puzzle pieces. We fit together. We see how they symbolically complete each other at the end when they're each missing an arm. But really, due to their similar trauma and experiences, they understand and complete each other in a much deeper way than anyone else can understand. And this understanding provides them with a great strength to overcome everything that they end up overcoming. So, I mean, I love the idea of a true love happy ending. I was not expecting that. I actually got really, really sad when she cuts off her hand, when she gets so mad at Charlotte, when she goes and beats her up. When they later, have Charlotte on stage and she's a part of it all. Oh, it made me so sad and mad that we couldn't just have a nice, happy, love and ending. And then we got it.
Yeah, in the middle of it all, they start kissing.
Right. It was amazing. It was like, I feel like the ending, it's so harsh. It's just this, over-exaggerated fantasy of what someone might want to do in that situation. But also, this is also part of the fantasy because we don't normally get this kind of movie where, they are conspiring together and then all of a sudden there's, a smile and a kiss and you're like, oh,
it's all
they're
okay.
working together.
Yeah,
it's like we don't ever get that. So I feel like that's a fantasy for us as well, which I guess can take us into the whole queer aspect of this film.
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot to say about the queer aspect of this because, like I said before, this is to me, it felt like a genuine lesbian love story, and it's done through a horror film, and there's a happy ending. So for me, it's like check, check, check. It checks all of my boxes for something that I'm looking for. So it's fantastic. Like, let's just, take a step back. Let's look at their relationship. So they meet, and they're expressing their love for each other. And Lizzie grabs her hand and says she's so happy to meet her.
I'm such a big fan. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I've downloaded all of your music. And that New York Times Magazine profile last month of you, those photos of you were amazing. And the way...
I was 9 when I first saw you perform. You were 14 and everything I wanted to be. My idol. Please don't be nervous around me, Charlotte. I'm just so happy to finally meet you.
And then later she's whispering into her ear about the juicy drama going on behind the scenes and how that gets her going.
I know I shouldn't spy, but that gets me wet.
And Charlotte's giggling and she's covering her mouth. And she, that's when she's looking at Lizzie and we can feel that Charlotte she's into this. She's enjoying this,
Right. It's not just an act, yeah.
She does that double take look, like, who is this person? And, it was very obvious to me as we were going through this movie that, Lizzie is very interested in her. She's very clear about her intentions. They when they had a moment alone, she says, will you go dancing with me later? And they're just staring at each other until Charlotte says yes, very clearly. Like, she knows exactly what she's saying yes to. She made a decision. This is not just a friend thing. She's like, yes, I'm going to go dancing with you. And I have an attraction to you. Like, there's an attraction going on here, a connection. And then Lizzie touches her hair, right. and they're just staring at each other.
Will you go dancing with me later?
Yes.
Good.
And then they leave to go do the duet. And there's just so much chemistry between them. It's amazing. Like, they just have so much chemistry. And even when they're playing, you can see them looking at each other and they just they're just smiling so much at each other while they're playing the duet. They're making these eyes at each other. It's very intense for me. Like, I love it. It's great. But, it's really intense. I think before they start the duet, Charlotte is very hesitant because she's like, oh, I'm an amateur. I haven't done this for like a decade. And then Lizzie reassures her.
Lizzie, I'm an amateur now.
You have been and always will be the person who makes my heart skip a beat when you play.
Which is a very intense thing to hear somebody say to you.
Well, especially since she's been out of the limelight for 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, to have such a place in Lizzie's heart still. You know, she has inspired her, but she's still there 10 years later.
Yeah, so Charlotte just pauses and she's blinking a few times and then she agrees to do the duet. And I think that me and you, Ketchum, I think we might be able to agree that making music with somebody that you are attracted to, like there's kind of nothing else like it. There's just this certain type of unspoken understanding that can happen when you're working together. I mean, I guess you could, that could be for anything that you're working together with somebody on, but I mean, music is its very own special thing because you're producing something in the moment together.
Right.
It's kind of like sex in a way because you're working together to make this thing happen that you can both experience at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you probably apply it to all kinds of creative projects, but we are close to music and we understand what they were feeling playing together. And I feel like that scene, what really got me, I mean, I love that song. That's probably the best cello song I've ever heard.
That's a fantastic song.
And what really got me is that it looks like they're really playing it. And you said that they actually learned some of that.
Yeah, they did have to learn to play so that because the director wanted to have shots, like face shots, and show them playing. Whenever you see them, it's really them playing. They didn't put like a double over their... they didn't put like their heads over doubles.
Right.
But when there are close-up shots of hands, those are doubles.
Right.
But, all of the faraway scenes that you see of them, those are real. They really had to learn. I think they said that they didn't have a lot of time to learn. So they learned for maybe like a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And then they just kind of had to get right to it. And they thought that when they were finished, they would keep up on playing the cello, but that just didn't work out. They returned the rental, they went back to their regular life, and now they don't remember how to play.
I felt like the cello duet was the moment in our story, the "you complete me" moment. Like they could feel it as they were playing, and that's why we see it like the as they're playing, we see the story unfold. Also, it's like an overlapping story of them holding hands and running to the club, and and as this progresses.
Well, I felt like it was foreplay. That's what I saw it as. The way that they were looking at each other while they were playing. This is foreplay. This is what it's like.
Right.
I mean, I know this. Like when you make music with somebody that you're attracted to, and then it gets into that level. But yes, then like you said, the scene starts cutting in and out, and they're kissing, they're dancing. Eventually, they're having sex together. As the song is climaxing, Charlotte is climaxing. It's just fantastic. I love the whole scene. I love that song.
And what I liked also was after the song's over, Lizzie looks over at Charlotte like, did you just feel what I just felt? And when she looks at her, it's like all the voices talking are muffled. Like they are not, or at least Lizzie's not there, right? Like they're not in the reality. They're in their own little bubble. And then that's when, I guess, after they're done playing, that she grabs her hand and runs off into the hallway where they can be alone.
And they start making out.
It was a pretty steamy scene.
Yeah, I loved it. So afterwards, we learn that this is not just Charlotte's first time with a woman, but first everything.
Have you ever been with a woman before?
I've never been with anyone before.
No one, ever.
My mom got sick. I went home. So everything else just got put on hold.
So I'm your first.
First and best.
Clearly, because of all the trauma that she had, that doesn't count. That's in an entirely different category for her. That doesn't count as anything like what she's experiencing now.
Well, I don't think we knew about the sex cult either at that point in the movie.
No, we didn't know. This is like, these are things that you pick up on a rewatch because this movie has a high rewatch value for this movie. So when we're going through this, it's her first time for anything like this. And, Charlotte just looks so happy with this. And then this is when Lizzie invites her on her rough and tumble vacation and says, I think we could have fun together.
I'm traveling out west tomorrow. Come with me.
Really?
Yeah. I'm doing it rough and tumble. Small buses, weird towns, as far away from first class as I can get. Unplugged from everything and everyone. I think we could have fun together.
I think we could too.
And she says, I've never met anyone like you before.
I've never met anyone like you before.
And then that's when I felt like they entered into a U-Haul relationship. I mean, it's like, wow, they're moving really fast. I mean, and as we carry on, it's going to get even more. But I mean, I don't know. Are there people out there who don't know what a U-Haul lesbian is at this point? Because I've been saying this for 2 decades. Because, I mean, if you don't know, you're not in the queer culture. It's, there's a stereotype that lesbians fall hard and fast for each other and are basically living together by the second date.
I thought it was 2 weeks. I thought it was a U-Haul in 2 weeks.
Well, either way, that's really fast.
Let me tell you my lesbian U-Haul story.
I have one too, but go on. We all have one.
What did I need a U-Haul for? Sherry and I were moving, and so this was like 2001. I don't know what year it was. Anyhow, we were moving, had to go get a U-Haul. And we went to get a U-Haul, and there were lesbian U-Haulers. And it was just hilarious because you could just tell by their interaction that they were a brand new couple. You could just tell, And we just thought it was so funny because that was probably, around the first time that popped up in our queer culture, pop culture. That was a new term for us. Like we knew what it was, and then we actually saw it. And I'll never forget it because it was just hilarious. They were debating, all these life decisions at the U-Haul store.
Wow.
And we were like, oh my gosh, these are U-Haul lesbians. They're here. They're ready. They're going to get that U-Haul. They're going to build a life together. What's your story?
I was a literal U-Haul lesbian because I met someone and we were both in this stage in our life where we didn't really know what our next life move was going to be. So we kind of essentially put our finger on a map and said, where are we going to go? And I picked Portland, and she said, sure, let's do it. We had only known each other for a short time. And so we literally rented a U-Haul, and we traveled. I mean, it's a longer, complicated story, but the short version is that we did, just kind of pick a city on a map, and we rented a U-Haul, took all of our stuff, and traveled to Portland, and here I am now. And I have a picture of us in front of the U-Haul.
Can I add to that story?
Sure.
You brought the U-Haul here. I
did, because we made a stop
at my house.
Yeah, we made a stop at your house in Cincinnati before because I also lived in Ohio, for people who don't know that. Because you live in Ohio, and I also am from Ohio.
Right.
And so at the time of that move, my stuff was still in Ohio. So when we got that U-Haul, we needed to go to Cincinnati because a friend of hers was in Cincinnati, and you happened to be there as well. So we were like, let's just go hang out in Cincinnati for a couple days. And so, we spent like a week traveling by U-Haul from Ohio to Portland. And it was a very scary trip once we got because it was the middle of winter.
Right.
Trying to travel in the snow and the mountains, that was horrifying to me. So there you go. I mean, real life U-Haul lesbian right here in the flesh. So.
See, I think a true U-Haul lesbian story is like your story, where both parties are just like, bam, we're just going to pick a spot and we're going to get a U-Haul and we're going to go. Like, to me, that is the truest of the lesbian U-Haul stories, as opposed to just one person moving in with the other. But, I guess that's like the ultimate scenario.
I have to say that it was also my Saturn return. And so I didn't believe in that kind of thing because people say there's going to be major life change when your Saturn return happens because you're around like 28, 29.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened.
Right.
My entire life changed during the Saturn return. Like nothing about my life looked the same like 1 year later.
Right.
It was insane.
Definitely.
Back to our movie UHaul lesbians. She was inviting her on her rough and tumble trip.
Oh, that's right. We got
and
way
she
off,
says
didn't
yes. Yeah. Then we do the bus trip, and that was an insane moment. Like, that felt even more U-Haul lesbian when Lizzie was sick outside of the bus and she's like puking and having diarrhea or whatever's happening, and then Charlotte's just on her knees wiping it up.
Right. She's like,
And I
I've
was
done
like,
this for my
man.
mother. I can do it for you.
I'm so sorry. It's okay. I took care of my mom for years. I can handle this.
臭婊子，回我这吃！
She is sick! You son of a bitch! Can't you see that she's sick? She's fucking sick!
Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet.
I was just like, man, this is an insane first date because they haven't actually broken apart yet
That's
from
hilarious.
the first time that they met.
Right.
So they're kind of technically still on their first date. And this is what's happening.
Well, also, I mean, all of that throughout the throughout the bus ride, there's many things that she says to show her that she's got her back, she's on her side. She stands up and gets the guy to pull over. Tries to get her water.
Sir, can you please stop the bus? Excuse me, can anyone help me? Hey, pull over the fucking bus! Do it!
And it's like, wow, she is all in. Her character has shifted from, manipulating her maybe, or, trying to befriend her, to like just being in love with this girl is how at this point, that's what you're feeling. You're just like, wow, she's gonna.
Yeah, day after.
Right. She's gonna clean up her sickness.
Day after they have sex.
She doesn't care that they are alone in the countryside. They get kicked off the bus, She's there for her.
Yeah. I mean, it's like she came there to save her, but then she fell in love and she didn't expect that. And she's there to, fell in love is a little intense, but how else can you describe that?
Right.
Whatever that feeling is when you first meet somebody and you're like, oh my God, this is it. This is the relation, it feels very intense at that time. And so.
Right. She wants to save her because she knows what she's going through, and she knows that she's been there 6 years longer than Charlotte had been there. And also, when Charlotte left there, outside of taking care of her mother and being in a mental hospital receiving shock therapy, we don't know anything about her, but we're led to believe that she doesn't really have a social life, or, she doesn't have any romantic relationships or anything happening. So for Lizzie to tell her all these amazing things, and then for them to have that physical connection, I think she is all in. I think she really, this is blowing her mind, Mm-hmm. And that's why it's such a twist when she hands her that hatchet. It just blows your mind because you're like, oh, she's all in, they're in love. And then she's just like, here, use this, or whatever she says. You're like, what? Mm-hmm. She's going to harm her? Wow, what a twist. I can't get over that twist.
But, then we learn that, in her mind, she's just trying to help her. And she felt like this was the only way to get Lizzie out of the situation because she's so deep in this cult situation.
Right.
That she has to resort to these drastic measures. And she feels like that there's nothing else that's going to get her out.
Right. And she tells her at a couple different times about taking care of her, and we see later the flashback after Lizzie has cut off her hand, and she basically tells her exactly what she did and why. And she says, go back to Anton. You're going to see he's going to be different. You're not going to be welcome there. Things are going to change, but you'll always have a place with me, or whatever she says. I'll always accept you.
She says, Anton will not be there for you, but I will always be there for you. This is while her hand is chopped off and bleeding.
Right.
And she says, I will always be there for you.
Right, and that makes me feel like before she gave her the knife, she already accepted full responsibility because she's in love, that she's going to have to take care of this person without a hand. You know, that this is her life now. That it's okay for her to chop off her hand because it's going to save her life, and she'll take care of her if she lets her, if she wants that.
And the next time you need Anton most, he will not be there for you. I promise you that. But I will be. I will be there.
Yeah, and then afterwards, you know, when 3 weeks have passed, Lizzie breaks into her house, starts beating up Charlotte, but then she falls against the wall, and then she's like, you know, Charlotte, you're right. I came around, you know, she comes around to her way of thinking, and she's like, everything you said is true. Like, he didn't want me. And then that's when Charlotte is laying on the ground, and she's just like, I will do anything for you. I am there for you, you know? And she has tears in her eyes, and she's just like, I want to do anything for you to help you.
Right.
It took this happening for me to fucking see it. I have to stop Anton. We have to stop all of them. I need your help. Anything.
So that's when they devise their plan. So, you know, we've got these two trauma victims who are coming together to take on this guy, and they come up with this master plan to trick him, and it works. And that's where we have our elevated fantasy about dismantling male power. Because if you try to pick apart this movie too much, it doesn't make sense. So you kind of just have to think of it as like this fantasy that's trying to accomplish a certain thing.
You know what would have been amazing if when they were on the bus and she's listening to Ready or Not or whatever it's called on her earbuds, she should have been listening to UNITY. That's what they should have thrown in there. Because this movie is all about their unity, that they are a unified unit. I mean, they become this power duo.
So that song is going to have to go into our Spotify playlist then, because
of course
that fits in with the theme of this movie.
Right. And for you out there who have not tried our Spotify playlist yet, visit our website or our Patreon and you can get the link. We've got lots of great music out there for all of these episodes. Mm-hmm. Did you know that this was filmed in and around Vancouver?
I did read that some of the scenes were shot in Vancouver, and some of them were, I think were they in Shanghai for real?
Well, I believe the scene where they're outside when Lizzie steals her little shot glass and they're standing out looking at Shanghai, I believe that part's real. And they said there was very little of them in China, that most of everything else was in Vancouver.
Yeah, like the bus scene is in Vancouver. And I was just rewatching this, I think it was last night. So at the time we've recorded this episode, I've now watched it 5 times in 1 month.
I've watched it 3.
And I will probably go watch it again, like this weekend.
I'm buying this one on Blu-ray, baby.
Oh, yeah. If that ever happens, man, I would love some... Oh, my God. I would love some commentary, some extras, some deleted scenes.
That'd be awesome.
And I would love for this movie to be played at Queer Horror in the theater in Portland, because I would love to go see this in the theater. It would be a dream. So yeah, I was rewatching this movie last night, and we were on the bus scene, and then, you know, I was watching it with a friend. I was watching with Dee, and she was like, you know what? This guy on the bus, he's speaking in English, but they just dubbed his voice. And she was like, if you go and watch, you can hear him. You can. If you read his lips, you can see him speaking in English. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have to go back and, like, watch that, because that would kind of make sense if they were filming in Vancouver and they just dubbed over,
right, I'm just
like, the English.
Catching on. So you mean like the bus driver was speaking English and they overdubbed Mandarin?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Like, if you lip read him, it looks like he's screaming something in English. I cannot remember what it was, but it was just like... It was something like, get off the bus, like, in English. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have to go back and, like, watch that.
Leave it up to Dee to catch the little tiny details.
But yeah, if we talk about the cinematography, I mean, I had never seen anything like that rewind effect before, and I thought it was awesome. Some people don't like it. I mean, I love everything about this movie. I'm going to be one of the biggest fans of this movie. Mm-hmm. So I loved the rewind effect, and, you know, I had never seen anything like it. And also I noticed in this movie that there was a lot of those diopter shots where you've got someone in front super up close, and then you've got stuff going on in the background, like right behind them, which the director said was, obviously influenced by De Palma. And he talks a lot in an interview about it, how that's one of his favorite directors. And he just talks about that style of shots in the 70s and the 80s that he did, and that he just loved it. And I mean, since we started doing this podcast, and now that I'm looking for that, I see that in so many movies,
Right.
It's like that happened in Jennifer's Body, which we talked about. It happened in this movie. It happened in Death Proof. But yeah, three off the top of my head, 3 movies out of 8 that we've talked about have been using these shots. But anyway, the director is very inspired by him, by Brian De Palma, and so he wanted to bring a lot of that into the perfection. And he was saying, how can we make each shot count here in a very beautiful way so that the audience watching will feel like they're in very safe hands, and that we're very used to close-ups in general because we watch a lot of television. So he tries to hold off on the close-up moments until they actually matter. And then when he's doing those effects, those close-up shots like that, then they have more of an impact and more of an effect because he's been holding off on that.
Well, I got a couple things to add. The cello solo we've already gone over, but to me that was the loveliest part of the movie. Just that whole scene, all of it, every bit of it. I mean, the close-up of their hands, the way...
Cello Duet number 3, that's what it's called.
Yes, the cello duet number 3. And I just thought everything about it was lovely. How we transform from that to, where we end up. I thought it was beautiful. That muffled talking. Another part that I thought was interesting but creepy was when Anton comes out, when Charlotte at age 13 messes up. And he comes out totally nude, but they blur it out. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was very tasteful, and it just made it creepy.
Right.
There was just something very unsettling about that blurred image.
But I also appreciate it because, again, that goes back to, we don't have to watch the details of the rape that's happening, which is something that you don't usually experience in a rape revenge. They like to show the whole thing, which we don't need to see.
Right.
You can allude to it and we get the picture. We don't need to see it. And so in this, it's like you're not even actually seeing him because it's so distorted. Like you're not even getting a clear picture of what he looks like. You're just getting the idea of it. Like without seeing the details of what's happening.
Right. It's like and those are things that I also don't like to watch in these movies is rape of women or the idea of rape, torturing women. Mm-hmm. And it's like we have all that stuff happening here, but we don't see it. It's like, we know it's happening. We don't have to see it. I thought that was much better, more tasteful than lots of other movies where we get thrown into that no matter if we want to see it or not. It's forced upon us. So I thought that was excellent. And one thing is that a lot of people refer to this movie as sick. I saw a lot of that. Yeah, like... As soon as the whole bus thing happens and the maggots on the window and stuff, people just freak out that this is so disgusting. And but if they stick with it, they like it. So I was reading a whole bunch of hilarious tweets where they're just like, this is the sickest movie, but I like it. And I thought that, as far as cinematography, I thought all of that was really good. Like it's so over-exaggerated. It's like an over-exaggerated count. As we often see in Korean movies, and it's very shocking, over the top. But it truly, in this whole movie, it has a purpose and a place. Like it wasn't just done to be gross or to make you sick. It had a true purpose, and we needed that shock. We needed some form of trauma, and it's not just disturbing for the heck of it. Mm-hmm. So I felt like all of that was excellent cinematography. The bugs in her arm. Just how they did all of that with the bus. It was, it was like you're on your edge of the seat and it just made you feel really uncomfortable. There's a lot of good cinematography stuff happening in this movie.
Yeah. So to get into the music a bit, we've already talked about duet number 3, the cello song, and that's fantastic. And as of now, none of that stuff is on Spotify. So, or maybe Yeah, I don't think that song's on Spotify. So maybe by the time we release this, it will be. But I mean, we're also gonna have a YouTube playlist. So
Right.
we're gonna have the playlist on Spotify and YouTube, and it's definitely gonna be in YouTube. We're gonna put that song in there. But there's also another song in there which is by the Chromatics, and I love them. And I love this song that's in the movie, which is called Petals, and it happens to be a Hole cover. So we are now talking about Hole again on this podcast.
We always need to talk about Hole. We should make sure that we talk about Hole and Lindsay Lohan every episode. One way or the
God,
other. We'll just
You managed to
slide
bring up
it in.
Lindsay Lohan
See?
yet again.
I just slid it in.
But okay, that Chromatic song is a Hole cover. And I'm very sad that it's only like 2 minutes long, and like the whole version is like 5 or 6 minutes. So I hate that it's only like 2 minutes because I love that song. And when I listen to that song, it feels to me like Charlotte and Lizzie's like theme song, like their love song. So to me, this is like when I hear the song, I think of them being in love and like working together and playing the cello together.
Definitely. All right. So one song that we hear during the movie is the Requiem by Mozart, the Lacrimosa movement. And it's like, out of all the beautiful classical music, why would they pick this song? And it first appears when Anton is driving his car, and he's really getting into it, and we know that he is a perfectionist freak. We already know there's, something deeper going on with his obsession for perfection. Mm-hmm. And I found this to be just such an interesting choice for a couple of reasons. One, Requiem by Mozart is an unfinished piece. I don't know what you know about it.
I don't know anything about it.
Okay, well, Mozart was, let me take a step back. Mozart was commissioned, he was a commissioned composer. So, we always view Mozart as this brilliant madman that made all this amazing music. But what was really happening was that he was under the gun to make music. He was commissioned. So that's how he made money. So people would hire him to write, for weddings or funerals or special events. All these different things were going on, and he'd have to make, this music better than the last one, So anyhow, he was writing Requiem while he was sick and dying. So he never finished Requiem because he died while he was writing it. And so I thought that was a little twist here, because this guy is so obsessed with perfection. And out of all of Mozart's pieces that he ever wrote, this would be the one that was far from perfection because he never got to finish it. He never got to tweak it. So I felt like that was on purpose. Mm-hmm. So while he was writing this composition, he didn't know who was paying him. A mystery person would drop off a bag of coins, And he was paranoid and he was sick, and he thought his wife was paying him to write the song that they would play at his own funeral, which is just twisted and wicked and crazy. So I kind of felt like that was some type of foreshadowing here, that Anton's listening to this, like, something that would be played at his funeral, like there's something coming for him that he's not aware of. So I just thought it was really interesting, because that is not a piece of perfection. I mean, we all know it and love it, but it was finished by this guy named Franz Xavier Süssmayr, and he either was trying to steal it by saying that he wrote it, or he was just trying to finish it. It's really unclear what his intentions were, but he came in and he finished that after Mozart died, so that they could use it as a finished Requiem. So I just found that really interesting. Well, Cassio, I think it's time for us to discuss the ending.
It's a bittersweet ending. It's twisted. There's a lot to say about this ending. It's insane. Okay, there's just insanity happening here. I guess we could just start at the beginning of all of this.
So this movie is divided into 4 different parts: mission, detour, home, and the duet.
I think we're going to have to take a step back and just kind of look at the larger picture, because this is there's a lot of information that we've learned by the time that we get here. It's twisted. It is a happy ending, but it's a bittersweet ending, because Charlotte and Lizzie have both lost limbs at this point, but they've succeeded in making Anton pay the price for his abuse. They're presumably in love by the time we end the movie, and they can still play their instrument together. And so, again, it's a fantasy. So they're trying to portray a certain message and tell a certain story.
Right.
And you just need to, you can't get bogged down on the details. This is a 90-minute movie. Like, we just need to get to it. So, in a way, I mean, I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is a sweet lesbian love story. And I was just joking to my friend, because I'm twisted, yesterday when we were rewatching this. I was like, if somebody ever comes to me and is like, what's a really great lesbian love story movie that you could recommend? And I would say, The Perfection.
Right. I think I will too.
And they would come back to me and say, what is wrong with you? This is twisted. How is this a sweet lesbian love story? But I feel like it is.
Right.
But again, if you get into the details, it gets complicated because, like, they chopped off his arms and legs. They stitched his eyes and his mouth shut.
Right.
So how they going to, we can't talk about the details of that, because if we try to get into, like, well, how's that going to work out in the long run? Like, eventually there's going to be cops and things and, like, but, where they end it, we don't have to think about that. We're just thinking about the fact that they did what they wanted to do. So what they've done is they've taken away Anton's power. He's now powerless. He can't say anything to them. He can't do anything to them physically. He can't even give them a look. All of his power has been stripped, and now they are in control, and they can go ahead and play, and they have to listen to him play, or he has to listen to them play, and they can play whatever they want, and there's he cannot respond to them. So it's probably this form of torture for him that he has to listen to this, and he can't say the things that he's used to. Like, he can't express himself.
Right.
I mean, for the purposes of the story, they've taken away... They've taken their power back, basically. They're these trauma victims who've worked together.
Right.
Which is why the ending is called Duet. They've worked together to take away this guy's power.
Right. So the power of the duet is their sense of pride and defiance. And... as we've already said a couple times, this is an over-exaggerated fantasy of what people may want to do in this type of situation. And they said that women in general, generalized statements, that women get to that point of a, power of a duet. They get to that point with the help of others. So especially, in this type of situation where someone has endured a deep trauma, sure, they may be working through that on their own, but there's this whole very empowering, stronger together thing that happens when women come together with the same purpose. And that's why this movie is kind of tied into Me Too and those other movements that happened, even though they've said that this movie has nothing to do with that. It was being filmed in 2017 when that was going on. Mm-hmm. And Logan Browning, in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, said, I hope everyone reevaluates how we treat women and women's rights to make their own decisions in this country. Mm-hmm. So, this ending, although it's super exaggerated, it is all about women taking back the power and the power of two, the duet of being stronger together, which I really like that message. I didn't like what they did to Anton. I would have preferred if they just killed him in some, quick way and just moved on and, rode off into the sunset. Mm-hmm. But, in our ending, we also had this very, what I call an art movie approach, that, although they are less than whole on their own because they're each missing a hand, that they are unified together. And we see this, again, this puzzle piece of them together with one hand each on the cello, making this complete person. Mm-hmm. And, what I liked most about the ending was a little bit before this, they play us. They continually play us, the viewer, throughout this movie. And, before we know it, they're working together. They play us. And it was so stressful.
Oh, yeah.
Then we're let in on what's really going on. And then it's like, oh, yeah, now we're a part of it. I don't know if you felt that way, but it's like as they're like fighting with him, I'm just like, yeah, I'm a part of this now. We're in on this little secret. We're in on this, this scheme that they're running against him.
Are you talking about right before they kiss at the ending when it's revealed that they are working together?
Right, from that kiss point up until they go into the room and start, telling him that they're going to sell his balls as trinkets or whatever they say.
Now, we're gonna fucking chop your balls off and sell them as trinkets.
Yeah, which, I mean, that was all totally absurd, by the way, and I loved every second of it.
Right.
Leading up to that kiss, because, yes, I was completely terrified. I thought horrible things were about to happen to Charlotte.
Right.
She's chained up, the goons are coming after her, Lizzie's coming after her. She's holding her severed arm up, and we get this very, very campy moment where she says, "Usually I like to use my fingers, but that's out of the question now, don't you think?" As she holds up her severed arm.
This will have to do.
And I was like, oh my God, what is happening in this? And then it's not until like a second rewatch. I mean, okay, so for me, it's like once I knew all the information and I do a rewatch on this, I am laughing the entire time.
Right.
Because it's so campy and over the top for those kinds of moments.
Right.
And I love it.
Right.
So the thing makes me laugh. It's like I was watching it last night and my friend was watching it for the first time and she was horrified, but I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, oh my God, this is just so good. Once you know all the details, it's just, you can see the camp in it. It's just fantastic.
I think the unfortunate part is that there have been a handful of movies where nothing good comes, right? Like, you have these stories that there might be some love, things are nice, and then these awful things happen, and they just keep compacting and compacting and compacting, and there's never a resolution, and you just feel horrible when the movie ends. So when things were happening, such as when she makes that comment about her arm without a hand, I just had this horrible terror in me the first time I watched it. Like, this is never going to get better. Nothing good can come of this. And it's like I felt in my own kind of trauma from watching movies where nothing, can get better at that point in the movie. So I was so overjoyed. I just cannot express how overjoyed I was when we find out that they are in on this together. And it just makes it so enjoyable, even though some brutality happens, such as when he takes the knife from Charlotte and, severs her arm against the bone in a horrible way.
Well, speaking of him doing the severed arm thing, is that in an interview with Logan Browning, when she was talking about how they took all of his limbs, she also said, we took all of his limbs, including what a man thinks his most powerful limb is.
Right.
And so I was like, whoa, she's alluding to the fact that they also took his genitals and all of that. And I was like, whoa, if that's true, like they got rid of everything.
Right.
And there's no way for us to know that by watching it.
Yeah, I mean, he is wearing, it looked like a bandage instead of underwear or instead of a disposable brief. It did look like it was a bandage.
I thought it was like a diaper or something.
Yeah.
Because he's just helpless now. Yeah, in that same interview, she said she wanted him dead. And there was like a debate about that. Just like what you said earlier, is that she wanted the satisfaction of his life ending. Right. And not that she agrees with that in real life, but for the movie's sake and for the sake of the character's trauma, she wanted him dead. But the director, Richard, thought it was important for Anton to have everything removed, which would be all the limbs and everything. So that he was forced to listen to women, and no matter what, he's forced to listen to women now, which he didn't have to do before. Right. And that's when Logan Browning said she kind of felt like a superhero for doing that whole ending scene.
Right, and we have to remember that all of this is fantasy, I don't feel that either of us condone this type of stuff when we watch it.
Right.
Just putting that out there. That personally,
there's better ways.
Right. Yeah. I mean, personally, I didn't like to see him tortured sitting in the chair. Really, because it's completely unrealistic. I mean, they've got an IV set up. Like they've got medical care happening here. to keep this person alive who's basically just a torso now with a head. You know, it's way out there, and it's like, that's not the kind of ending I prefer, but I can appreciate it in the realm of this movie's world. You know, that's what they needed to happen. So I will accept it. It's hard for me to accept it, though, because that was not the ending I wanted.
Well, that kind of goes into the sequel question, because I was going to ask you, like, what do you think about a sequel? Because with Logan Browning, in an interview, she said, you know, now that they've done this, they have this mess on their hands with all the people because they've also murdered 2 people.
Right.
Like, we don't even think about that because it was such a short scene.
They murdered 3.
Right, they murdered 3 people. Mm-hmm. And so she said it's going to take a while for them to figure out how they're going to address that.
Right.
But in her fantasy, she would like for them to start a women-led conservatory where young people are allowed to seek an artistry without an ideal of perfection, where they are free and liberated enough to not try to please people who are in that power position. And then Allison Williams says that she loves the idea because it would be a way for them to continue doing the thing that gave them so much joy in a way that would bring them real joy at no cost, given that there was an unbelievable cost earlier in their lives. So in Logan Browning's fantasy sequel, you know, they're running a women-led conservatory, living happily ever after.
Right, yeah. I'd like to see them get that U-Haul.
Oh my God. As far as the sequel,
yeah,
I mean, that would be interesting to see.
I want them to have their U-Haul. I want them to ride off into the sunset. I want them to have their little happy life. They can have their conservatory, but I want a story. I want a love story. Now that we've had a taste, I want a love story without interference of these crazy people that they have to do crazy stuff to. I want a sequel that's beautiful love.
So we move out of the horror genre with these characters, and we just
fine.
go into like a romance, maybe like a comedy romance with Charlotte and Lizzie. Oh my God. Can somebody please make that movie?
Let's talk about the wig on a wig, shall we?
Oh God.
So the wig, her taking off the wig reflects the pain of her character, right?
Yeah.
Like when she pulls that off, she's like looking at him, like, look what I've gone through. You know, this is me, and now I'm ready, right? It's like she's got to this point of clarity, and she's stepping out of the pain by taking off that wig and being herself, which was empowering.
She's revealing her true self now.
Right.
Which is also one of my favorite moments, because she is pulling a wig off of a wig.
It's kind of like a Scooby-Doo moment where they pull off the face.
But do they ever do 2 faces?
Oh, yeah.
It's been a long time since I've watched it.
Yeah,
I think
they
they do, yeah.
They're like, Mr. Brown, and they pull it off, and they're like, you're not Mr. Brown, Mr. Smith. It's Mr. Jones.
So I think that leads us into our favorite or notable scenes. Or do you have anything else that you want to say about the ending or sequel thoughts?
Well, no, I don't. I'd like a sequel. I'd like a lot of love. It could be a horror movie. You know, they can twist it in somewhere, you know, that they're on a vacation. There's somebody stalking them. I don't know. It can still be a horror movie, but I'd like to see more of them. I thought they had good chemistry together. Yeah, it'd be enjoyable if they continue on with this and get away from Anton. I mean, because, you know, there's a lot of girls living in that building. Like, where were they while this screaming and madness and mayhem's happening? What are they going to do with them now? Are they going to send them home? You know, what's going to happen? That's what I want to know. I want a sequel.
All right. So then, yeah, favorite and notable scenes. This is where we kind of throw in anything that we may not have already discussed, and just anything that we thought was fun or, you know, a favorite.
Right.
And so for me, I know, like, so on my 4th watch, that's when I actually noticed at the beginning that Charlotte had scars on her wrists at the beginning when she hugs Anton for the first time.
Right.
And I completely missed that every single watch before. It's like every time I watch it, I just keep catching new things. I mean, I think you said that you noticed it
Right.
clearly in the beginning, but I did not, I mean, it's so fast too. It just happens for like a couple seconds, and I was like, whoa.
Right.
We just learned a lot about her character right there.
Yeah, my first favorite scene that I keep talking about is the cello club scene, just because it flowed so well and it made you feel it. Like, I know you felt it, because you just said you did. I felt it. I feel like everybody is going to feel that when they see it. Like, it was done so well. Do you have any other favorite scenes, or?
Yes.
I had two more.
I have a stupid joke about how Lizzie calls Charlotte her hero. Like, there's a part where she's like, "You're my hero."
Right.
And then I wrote down that she's not beating around the bush about her feelings, so that later she will be eating around the bush. But I don't know how to fit that, and I'm not going to say that in any way. But
That is hilarious.
so as far as the pills, did you think of anything weird the first time you saw the pills? Did it
I
trigger
did.
anything in you, or?
Yeah, when she had the pills on the bus, that's when I saw the shape and the color, and I thought, those are not ibuprofen. I didn't catch it, though, at the hotel when she first gave them to her.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it at all, and I do have prescription ibuprofen, and I didn't think about it, I just went with it. I was like, nah, those pills look a little weird, they're brown, but whatever, and I just kind of went with it. I didn't think she was doing anything evil. I didn't think she was giving her, like, the wrong pills.
Right. I didn't either. I thought they looked weird, but I didn't think too much of it. And since they'd already led us to believe that this was a contagion horror story, that's what I thought. I thought, wow, this poor girl, she's contracted whatever that man had at the event, and she is dying. They're on a bus to nowhere, and there's no help, and she's dying.
Yeah, and so for the bus scene, that was very notable to me because I thought that was the movie, that it was going to just progress more, because that was very horrifying. It was kind of like The Descent for me, where, I mean, this isn't a spoiler, but in The Descent, they're all doing the cave, what would you call that? They're like, I don't know if they were doing the splunking thing, or if they were just exploring caves.
Cave exploring.
But there's a part, I mean, it's a horror cave movie, so like, there's a
My
part where
favorite.
where bad things happen and they're starting to get trapped in the cave, and like, you think that's the horror of the movie, is them getting trapped in the cave, but it's not, because we go on to have a whole other horrifying situation happening, which I'm not going to talk about, but this movie reminded me of that, because you think the bus scene is the horror, and I felt horrified watching it, and it was just really, I mean, I just imagine trying to be in that position. I can't. It reminds me of being in like a Greyhound bus in the 90s, but like even then, I think they had bathrooms on the bus.
Yeah, the Greyhounds look a lot better than the bus they're on in this movie.
I loved that. I thought that was the horror movie, and that was going to be the rest of this movie, is somehow them, because they get kicked off the bus and they're stranded, and I was just like, oh my god, they're going to be on some horrifying adventure. But like, none of that happens at all. It's like every 20 minutes something new is happening, and you're like, okay, I had no idea where this was going,
Right.
because this just went in a totally different direction.
Right, and that's one of my notable scenes, is when Charlotte pulls out that knife when they get off the bus and tells her to cut off her hand, because there's that moment of, wait, why does she have this knife? And then, wait, is she crazy? It's like your brain does that so fast before the girl cuts her hand. It's like you don't really have enough time to process it. It like really puts you in this weird, confused place.
Yeah, and then they do the rewind, so like so you're not thinking about it too much, because you're like, wait, what's happening now? And then they reveal. Right. And then that second hatchet shot, that's when I started laughing on my first rewatch. I was like, this is so campy.
Right.
It looks like she pulled a hatchet out of her jacket. I don't know if it was in her bag, but I was like, she's been carrying this hatchet in her jacket the whole time. How has she been, functioning with a hatchet in her jacket? But it was probably in her bag, but it felt like she just pulled it right out of her jacket.
Right. Here.
You know what you have to do.
Yeah. Take this. You know what you have to do. So in Act 3, When Lizzie goes to Charlotte's house to beat her up, and then she stops and tells her that she was right, and she slumps to the floor. I felt that was such a significant part of the story because it's a shift. It's like she's got all this rage because she's lost her hand, she's lost her career, she went back to home, and now she's lost her home, and she's come there to kill her. Yet there's this love in her, or understanding, or whatever's some level of trust of what Charlotte had said to her. And she slumps down and says, "You were right." Mm-hmm. And that's one of my favorite scenes, just because it's a shift, and it's just such a horrible tragedy, and it's a shift in that. I really enjoyed that. I would have liked to have seen more of that moment, more of that discussion. I mean, that was just a part of our second rewind, where they went back and caught us up.
Because they got it on too. Like, there was some stuff going on. Like, after they decided their plans and everything, I'm sure they had a date night.
Oh, I'm sure.
And that they hung out for a while.
Stayed that night.
I would have liked to see, to have seen what happened that night after they worked it out.
That house was very cozy. I really liked her house.
So yeah, maybe, at the end of it, they go back to that house. So yeah, I mean, so then in Act 4, I guess, to end this, what's notable to me is that it was a little weird because, okay, so when it's panning over Anton and he's limbless, and then we're also watching them playing cello, and I had these very strange conflicting feelings because I felt so emotional watching this lesbian love story and seeing this happy ending for them. But then at the same time, there's this man with no limbs and he can't talk or see. And it was just, it was very strange to have those feelings at the same time. This happy emotional stuff, but then and then there's this limbless guy over here.
Right.
It's a conflicting, odd, happy ending.
I felt like at that point, my thought was, are they intentionally missing notes to drive him crazy? Mm-hmm. Are they doing what he doesn't want?
Well, I think that goes into the close a little bit. So, this will bring us into our fun facts and trivia section. So, because in an interview, I mean, I don't think that you can tell this by the movie, but Allison Williams was saying that Anton gave Charlotte the party outfit at the beginning in order for her to fit the idea of what he wants her to look like to try and pass within that community. Mm-hmm. And so that wasn't her character's choice of an outfit. It was his, and he was again controlling her and what he wanted from her. But at the end, when they're playing that cello together, she said, now they're finally able to wear what they want. So, not only are they playing what they want in front of him, they're dressed exactly how they want to dress, and they're looking how they want to look.
How were they dressed? Do you remember?
So in the ending scene, we see both of them come out onto that stage, and we see Charlotte. I mean, they look fancy, a little bit fancy. So, Charlotte is wearing a long black dress, and then we have Lizzie wearing a long white dress. And they've got high heels on, and Charlotte is letting her short hair fly in the wind, I guess. So I thought that was interesting because those weren't things that I picked up on when I watched it. I wasn't really thinking about where their clothing choices came from. I really don't think that you could pick up on that.
Right.
That he was the one to give her that party outfit.
Right. I wouldn't have really thought that. I mean, it makes sense, though, because she was traveling quickly from living there for 10 years. She probably wouldn't have had any nice outfits. She wasn't going out, and so he wanted her to represent him.
Okay, so I had two more little, tidbits, is that Anton's last name is Backoff, and that's kind of back off, get away.
Right.
So I feel like that had to have been intentional. And also, I learned with an interview with Logan Browning that during the scene where she's chopping her hand off, she was not actually holding a hatchet or anything similar. She was just holding a little brown handle. And then everything else was CGI built around the handle.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is fascinating. Mm-hmm. And so she said that she was just kind of beating herself with this brown handle. And they kept saying to her, you have to pretend that there's actually a blade and it's not going to go as far down.
Right.
You can't go as far down as you're going. So she had to keep struggling with not chopping down as far down as she wanted to. So that's interesting to me. Like, why would they do a CGI hatchet when they could just have like a fake hatchet?
Right.
So I think that this movie has very high rewatch value. And so, you know, in all these interviews, it's especially with Allison Williams, she said that she was trying to make facial expressions in a way that looked a certain way for your first watch, but then when you go back and rewatch it, they have like a different meaning for you. So I thought that was really interesting. I mean, again, this movie, it's like you get so much out of it the more that you watch it.
Right.
And she said she tried really, really hard to do that. One specific thing is that she says there's the balcony part, like when they're out in the balcony at the beginning. And she said at this point, Charlotte has been watching Lizzie's career very closely. She's been reading about her. She's been watching things about her. And so she says to her, she's trying to assess the situation. And she specifically says to her, do you ever think about leaving?
Right.
To assess where is Lizzie at in this. And then Lizzie is just like, no, this is my family. I'm not, you know, she's in it.
Do you ever think about leaving?
Back off? It's my family. I can never.
Never.
No, never. And anyway, the work. This special work. It's what's expected of us.
So at that moment, that's when she starts to make these facial expressions that look one way on a first watch, and then they look a different way on a rewatch.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like because she befriended her and they had a connection so quickly, she was hoping that she could just ask her, do you want to leave? And that Lizzie'd be like, yes, get me out of here. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it happened, you know, and she had to come up with something else.
So also in that same interview, she said that she wants you to decide if this is a queer story. She can't say, it's your interpretation.
Right.
I know that both actresses said that they loved this script because there were no labels.
Right.
So, you know, there's no labels. They could just be queer. They could be whatever. There's no labels. They're into whatever they're into. But because this is our own interpretation and we're not told one way or another, and I want a lesbian love story, I just call it a lesbian love story. Because that's what I really want. And there's nothing to say that it's not. It's just your own interpretation.
Right. Yeah, my interpretation is that it's not, I mean, it is a lesbian love story, but it's not a lesbian love story because I feel like if they would have met regardless of their sex, they would have had this connection because they are so similar. You know, they've experienced all the same stuff and this perfection thing. You know, they play the cello all day long, every day. This is their life. Like, you know, not many people can relate to that. So I felt like regardless of anything about these characters, they would have, this still would have happened. But I do appreciate that it was presented to us as two females.
Yeah, I mean, you know, ultimately it's a revenge story, and there just happens to be a love story thrown in.
Right. And, you know, that's for several reasons. You know, everybody loves a love story, and, you know, it makes the revenge that much sweeter. You know, they are doing it for each other as well as themselves, and then they have this whole unity thing going on that they've, like, you know, their strength is at this heightened level because they believe in each other and they're going to make this happen. I think it really made the revenge powerful. Like how I mentioned earlier that this is a rape revenge story, and it's not like I Spit on Your Grave, which is a movie of one woman on her own.
I can't watch that.
But on her own doing that is very different from what we received in this movie, which is, you know, two people combining that effort, and it's powerful. Mm-hmm. It goes from a survival movie, you know, revenge as a form of survival, to revenge to do the right thing and to heal and to stop this horrible cycle.
So I actually had one more tidbit before we get into our awards that I forgot to mention, which was just going back to the rewatch thing, is that the director said that they were very specific about the shots that they use. So like during the rewind, he would use different shots or different takes of the same shot. You know, you're seeing the same scene, but it's like, you know, it was done slightly different. And then there's also certain scenes where it is different. So, like on the rewind. So when you rewatch it, it's like, that's not how it happened the first time around. So, like, one example that I love that I picked up on is when the Charlotte and Lizzie go into the bus, and Charlotte wipes the bugs off her back, and she's like, "Oh, you had bugs."
Right.
And then we go to the rewind, and then when we see her doing it again, she's like, "Oh, I was just getting rid of these bugs on you," or like, "You had a bug on you." And then she does this really huge, gigantic, psychotic smile and like
Right.
kind of tilts her head that kind of reminded me of Kathleen Turner in Serial Mom.
Right.
Oh, God. What?
Nothing.
What? There was a bug.
I was like, wow, that is not the face she made the first time around. And I loved it because it just felt so campy the second time around. Like watching the rewind shot of it.
Right.
Because it's like, why is she smiling that much? You know, and it goes back to her being a very confusing character. Like, because you can't tell what she's, feeling or thinking about this. Like, why would she smile that way?
Well, I mean, the way I took it was that it's because it's fake. She's trying to put it into Lizzie's head that there's a bug. So that as Lizzie starts to have her hallucinations, she sees bugs.
But that smile, though, it's like, why
Right.
does she have like a psychotic smile the second time around?
Right. Like she was enjoying it. She's enjoying the
Yeah.
thought of, oh, this girl's going to start hallucinating soon and it's going to be funny.
It's like, it's the psycho lesbian trope.
Right,
Or
right.
she's getting a thrill out of it, or I don't know. She's just smiling and I'm reading too much into it.
I do think that we have a psychotic character on our hands, FYI. I really do. I think that before the whole bug scene, I think she already knew when she picked up that cleaver or whatever we want to call it, that she was going to cut off her hand, or the girl would cut off her own hand. And I think she already had this whole thing mapped out at that point. But I also think, because she's a UHaul lesbian, that she already had it in her mind that she is going to take care of her for the rest of her life in exchange for this. I think like she's done this whole bartering thing within herself. And that's why we see that smile, because it's so crazy what's getting ready to happen, what she knows is getting ready to happen, that she's smiling because it's almost like two young children, and she's flirting and she's doing little silly things that get on their nerves or whatever. It's like her, if I can explain this right, it's like her mind is at this other place where all of this is really minuscule on the bigger scale here, because the bigger scale is that they're going to be happily ever after, and the bigger scale is that they're going to have all this revenge, and it's going to be great, and their lives are going to change. But it's like this whole psychotic level too, where it's like she's enjoying it. She is deeply enjoying what is getting ready to happen because she already has it all played out in her head what's going to happen. I think she's psychotic.
Maybe in her mind, she just genuinely thinks she's about to do something good. So she's like getting happy. She's like, all right, we're starting the process now
Right.
of getting Lizzie out of the situation. And now she's just like really happy.
Right.
Which is twisted. But, I mean, again, this character is very complicated because of the childhood that she had and like all of that trauma that has to affect how she's dealing with this situation right now. Like this has to affect how she decided to get Lizzie out.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that she's psychotic, but I mean she just doesn't know the right way to do things because she wasn't raised to know how to correctly deal with things.
So do you think she's going to be a good girlfriend in our sequel? Is she going to be able to handle these things? Is she at a place in her life where she's going to be able to handle this relationship?
I have no idea. I mean, I think she genuinely really, cares about Lizzie and wants, we've seen her say she's there for her. She will do whatever she needs to for her. But as far as how she deals with the rest of the world, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know how she's going to handle real life outside of this relationship. So Allison Williams, call us. We need to get the details. How is she going to handle life after leaving the Anton situation? All right, so I think, we're getting towards the end here with we've got some awards to give out. So how many awards do you have?
Let's see. I have 5.
Okay, I have about 8.
Okay.
So then I guess I'll start.
Okay.
Since I have more. My first award, which I think is very obvious, is the fact that I feel like this is a a love story between women with a happy ending, and the fact that it's done in a horror movie. So for me, it gets an award for those things, those three things together.
Wig on a wig. That's where I'll start.
That's definitely one of my awards, is pulling a wig off of a wig. I cannot get over it.
That is straight out of RuPaul's Drag Race, as I said earlier when we were not recording. It's hilarious. It's total camp. I mean, I understand the seriousness of it, but it is hilarious. That was a great moment in the movie.
Yeah. I give it an award for the music, especially the cello duet and the chromatic song. I think there was great music in this movie.
Yeah. I also did the cello composition. I felt like that's the best cello duet I've ever heard. And I loved that they played it, or they at least looked like they were playing it. I thought it was great.
I gave it an award for the twists of the movie because, I'm a person that didn't see any of them coming. I didn't know what to expect. I was the perfect audience for this movie. This movie did what it intended to me. So I give it an award for all of the twists.
And to add to that, they totally obliterated our expectations. I mean, really, that's how it felt for me. It's like, it's a twist, but it's like, we can't have expectations in this movie. Once that first twist happens, all of the expectations are out the window. They do it to us more than once. They keep us guessing. And for the most part, each trauma had a reasonable and well-crafted plan behind it. So it left you feeling okay about it. Even the dismembered man at the end, there's a level of feeling okay about it because it's their revenge and that's how they wanted it.
So I gave it an award for all of the campy stuff because I loved it. I love camp stuff so much. And there were quite a few moments of that in this movie.
I gave Allison Williams, who played Charlotte, an award for Is She Unstable? Because I felt like I was asking myself that all the time.
I gave it an award for being a rape revenge movie that doesn't feel like a rape revenge movie. Like, they handled this aspect of it different from any other way that I've seen, which we've already talked about. Like, it wasn't traumatic for me to watch this. It didn't feel exploitative. It didn't feel like they showed me any unnecessary scenes. I think they did everything in a way that worked for me. I mean, everybody's different, but for me, as far as that genre goes, which is not my thing, I think the movie did it very well, and it was great that you don't even know that that's what you're watching until the end. So I give it an award for the chemistry between Allison Williams and Logan Browning.
All right, so that was the end of my awards. Did you say you had one more?
Yes. So my last award would be for the bus horror scene, because I thought that was going to be the real horror of the movie. But also, it was just a really great scene. Like, that was just a great moment in horror for me.
Right. I think the horror of that scene was the realness, the dirtiness of it. They're in a foreign country. They don't speak the language. They're on this mountainside where there's not a lot of civilization. That was...
They're far away from a hospital.
Right.
So that brings us to our rating. So what would you rate this movie?
I gave it a 3. I would watch this several times, I think. This one will be a classic, a new classic for me.
Yeah, again, the rating, the 1 is that you kind of like, you couldn't make it through, you don't ever want to see it again. 2 is like, it was maybe you made it through once, you never need to watch it again, you wouldn't recommend it. But 3 is like, oh, I love this movie, I'm going to watch it forever. And so... normally I would give this movie a 3, but I was like, can we maybe just give it a 10? Can I just go all the way up to a 10? Because that's what I want for this movie. Because it's that good. This is probably my favorite movie that we've done on this season.
Yeah.
I think probably next to Death Proof.
I think this one was a nice little surprise, Like, we'd recorded, several episodes, and we hadn't really, put this into the mix. And then we both watched it, and we're like, yep, this is it.
We're going to kick another movie out and put this one in.
Right.
But, we'll probably do that movie next season. We won't talk about that. We don't want to say what movie got kicked for this one.
Right. It'll be a surprise.
Yeah. And maybe we'll tell you next season when we're like, all right, this is the one that we kicked off for the perfection.
Right.
All right, so do you have any wrap-up thoughts about the season or anything like that, you know?
Well, I mean, we've presented 8 episodes. I think we've done pretty well at having never done this before. And I'm eager to do a season 2, and I hope we can make that happen. You know, this takes a lot of time.
So, yeah, we're wrapping up the season, and so do you have a favorite episode that we recorded?
Yeah, I think I have a couple of favorites. I think the deep dive that I did for Carnival of Souls, where I got to like go back into who did it, why they did it, things that I never knew about that movie when I've seen it like, 50 times or something. That was fun and exciting to learn all that new information. But overall, I think the one I had the most fun doing was Death Proof.
Oh, yeah, me too. I mean, that one was the most fun, and that's also, well, prior to this episode, the longest episode that we have.
Right.
And I'm going to say that this episode is probably going to be even longer. But yeah, I just love that world of Death Proof, and I do love that episode. So, man, I mean, we've done a lot of my favorites, but, I love the Final Girls. So it was really fun to do the deep dive into the Final Girls. I mean, I had fun doing the deep dive on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Part 2.
Yeah, me too.
And this one was really fun to do a deep dive into. I mean, this whole podcast is really fun for me because I don't normally do so much of a deep dive into the movies that I like. So, whenever we pick a movie, it's interesting because we get to learn all this information that we may not have known.
Right.
And so to me, that's a fun process. And like we said earlier in the episode, we're going to go on a little hiatus so we regroup, figure out what we want to do for a season 2, take a little break. But like Ketchum said at the beginning, we will be back for Thanksgiving and for Christmas with a special episode. We might have some mini-sodes here and there before a season 2 comes out. We do have some different ideas floating around that we are trying to craft.
So take a moment and visit us on Patreon now and help keep this show growing. We love to bring you a season 2. There's so many more movies that we'd like to assess and investigate at a deeper level with you. So find us at patreon.com/AA Horror Highway. And as I mentioned earlier, we spend 30 to 45 hours per episode of our free time, depending on the complexity. So that includes research, taking notes, recording, watching the movie a few times, editing, making audio clips, adding audio clips, and we even send it out of house for final mixing. So we would love your support. Come over and show us some love on Patreon.
And so that wraps up our season, our first season.
Tune in on Monday, Thanksgiving week, for a special episode when we will discuss John Waters' classic Serial Mom from 1994.
Yeah, we tried to figure out a Thanksgiving movie, like one that had a Thanksgiving theme, but it turns out that a lot of Thanksgiving movies suck. So we had a very hard time. I mean, there's some that are okay, but again, with the amount of work that we put into this, we really want it to be a movie that we love and not something that we just feel lukewarm about. So we decided to do Serial Mom because it deals with similar themes of Thanksgiving, the idea of family. I think there's a lot of food in that movie, and there's killing. We've got our serial killer, and we've got a son who loves horror, and I believe he works at a video store. So, we felt like Serial Mom can fit a Thanksgiving theme.
Right, and somehow it just dropped into our lap. I'm not really for sure who said Serial Mom first, but as soon as we said it, we're like, that is the movie because it's comedy. It doesn't really fit in with the rest of the movies we've been doing, but we love it. So that's a great one for a special holiday.
And we're going to have a special guest.
Ooh.
We are going to bring on our friend Dee, who is the one who has been mixing our episodes.
Yay.
And she loves the movie. We all love the movie, so we're ready to do this.
It'll be a very special Thanksgiving, and you don't want to miss it. It'll make your week the best Thanksgiving ever.
We thought it would be fun to have a guest, since Thanksgiving is about getting together with family. And, we've known her for how many years now?
Forever.
I mean, I've known her for like 17 years. So that should be interesting.
Yeah,
she's more of a comedic personality. So, while we're more serious and she's more like the comedian of the group.
Right, yeah, it'll be a whole new dynamic.
I hope she doesn't panic now that I've called her the comedian and and she's going to say, "Oh my God, now I have to be really funny." People are going to be expecting me to be a comedian. But yeah, like you said, it'll be a whole different dynamic because she's a whole different kind of personality. Right. She's going to bring her own thing to the table.
And this wraps up the final episode of Season 1 of the AA Horror Highway. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at AA Horror Highway, and on Twitter at Horror Highway, HWY. You can also find all these social links and more on our website at horrorhwy.com. If you're interested in our playlist, you can go out to YouTube and find us at AA Horror Highway. And we also have a playlist on Spotify that we will be linking as well. I'm Amy Ketchum.
And I'm Amy Cassio.
And be sure to come back the week of Thanksgiving for our special Thanksgiving episode. We'll see you there.